Welcome everyone to Break the Stigma. We're here with Carlos today, and I'm so excited because he's going to share a little bit more about his mental health journey, as well as how he practices and has helped many individuals with his practice. So Carlos, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your training, what you do in the mental health community?
Sure. Well, as you heard, my name is Carlos. I'm by training a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and I still see patients a couple of days a week via telehealth in some remote parts of Washington State. I also serve on the board of directors for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI National, which is the largest grassroots advocacy organization dedicated to improving the lives of individuals with mental health here in the United States. And I'm currently a student full-time pursuing legal education at the University of Michigan and policy education at the Harvard Kennedy School as a Zuckerman Fellow at the Harvard Center for Public Leadership. So I wear many hats, but the most important one of them all at the end of the day, I believe, is my lived experience. I'm someone living in recovery with schizophrenia, and that certainly imbues my work with a sense of purpose and mission. And
Yeah, you wear many hats, and that's incredible. Oh my gosh, you are making a huge impact in this world, and I have no doubt that you will continue to do so. So could you just share a little bit more about your story and your journey with mental health?
Sure. Well, I first started noticing changes in my mental health in probably middle to late adolescence. I remember there was times where my mind would sound like a broken radio switching between channels, and I couldn't go to sleep because of it, of those kind of disorganized and racing thoughts. There was times where I would feel sad and alone for no particular reason. Nevertheless, I still did well in high school. I graduated summa cum laude, a National Hispanic Scholar, and was accepted into an early admissions program for medical school at Ohio State. But as is often the case, when left untreated, mental illnesses become episodic and resurface. And by my senior year of college, I had began to experience a full-blown, florid episode of psychosis. I began college. I switched from a pre-med major to a literature major, and then became a religious major, becoming increasingly preoccupied with religion. Studying all sorts of texts. In fact, at some points when the psychosis came on, I started hearing what I thought were angels and started believing I was a prophet or so forth. Anyway, by my senior year of college, I was gravely ill, and I was at some points eating out of trash cans and rambling incoherently to myself. But fortunately for me, I had a friend I had known since high school who called my mom and said, something's off with Carlos. You should come to campus immediately. And my mom came to campus, and she had a meeting with my academic advisor and myself. And in the moment that changed my life, my academic advisor said, Carlos, you're an adult. You have the right to privacy. I don't have to share anything that's happening with you on campus. And I said, with all due respect, Dr. Clark, I have a Cuban mother, so I've never really had the right to privacy. So, all kidding aside, it really was a turning point for opening the way towards an honest conversation about my mental health challenges in college. And from there, we were able to begin the process of getting help. And from that point, we saw a team of various mental health professionals in my home, in my community. And I was ultimately diagnosed with adult onset schizophrenia around my 22nd or 23rd birthday. And that was certainly a changing point, both for worse and for better. But I think ultimately, in my case, it has been something that has allowed me to grow from that sort of adversity and trauma, if you will. So that's kind of how it all went down, my whole college experience and my diagnosis and getting the initial early intervention help that I needed.
Wow. What a story. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Can you share a little bit about what you found most helpful during that whole journey? What inspired you to kind of seek treatments? What was that initial baby step that turned into bigger steps into finding help?
Well, for me, the turning point was really that moment where I had that meeting with my mom and an advisor. And I think what it highlights is the fact that we want communities that support people that have mental health challenges. And even though I did my due diligence and went to see the school psychologist, we failed to intervene and identify what was happening.
Hmm.
So instead, it was family and friends that facilitated that kind of initial step in that early intervention. But along the way, you know, journey is the journey of recovery is a lifelong journey for many people with chronic mental health conditions, especially serious mental health conditions. And I think in the beginning there's a desire for kind of like a silver bullet or one magic pill that'll kind of that'll fix all the issues. And the reality is it's there's a there's a lot of different interventions that help along the way. And some of those for me, I'll focus on like two or three that were particularly um, have been particularly salient in my recovery. Certainly, family support. Having family there to provide for my basic needs early on, and provide me with guidance in terms of encouraging me, nudging me to go to support groups and share my story has been important. Peer support has also been very important, whether it's been the opportunity to hear the stories of other people in recovery and living with schizophrenia, such as Ellen Sachs, and seeing role models, as well as the day-to-day interactions with other people that have the shared lived experience, helps kind of navigate uh, this condition, which is a day-to-day, can be a day-to-day struggle. In addition to family and peer support, and this is kind of a focus on the psychosocial aspect of it, I think finding a sense of uh, meaning and purpose in one's adversities and trauma is critical uh, to grow psychologically in a mature way and to cope with these in a healthy way. So for me, it's been service through the National Alliance of Mental Illness, NAMI National, through becoming a mental health clinician myself and becoming an advocate for mental health care reform. These roles and these identities have allowed me to cope with my adversity in a way that I am altruistic and can help others. And and that's a bit of focus on the psychosocial side. Of course, it goes without saying, with the condition of the variety I have, a serious mental health condition such as schizophrenia, a mainstay of treatment is still medications. At the end of the day, medications um, can lay down the foundation for the person to then build the house of recovery on, so to speak, with the necessary work of going to support groups, meeting peers, you know, um, uh, living a pretty much straight and narrow path in terms of life. Not staying out too late and disrupting one's sleep, or not indulging in substances or things of that sort. Um, but still, uh, medication may be a necessary condition, but it's often insufficient. So I often talk about the other important aspects that are left out of the conversation, such as the psychosocial interventions and services.
Absolutely. I've seen a commonality in that the community that one experiences during their journeys of mental health has been so, so important. Just having that love and that care and that support
Hmm.
is, yeah, changing, life changing. And I mean, the work that you do is also inspiring, but also making such a big difference in a lot of people's lives. I have no doubt. So we're just going to take a little bit of a switch right now, and only if you feel comfortable, can you share a little bit about if you've felt stigmatized throughout that mental health journey?
Sure. Well, stigma comes in a variety of forms. There's the external stigma of people perceiving you differently based on your diagnosis or the assumptions they make based on that, and the subsequent discrimination you can face, which can certainly be disheartening to think that people are going to make decisions based on aspects of myself that aren't necessarily true,
Mhm.
or based on these presumptions, and don't really see me for the real person that I am, or my whole person. And then there's the self kind of internalized stigma. I certainly had my own preconceptions of what it meant to be someone with schizophrenia, and that didn't necessarily involve graduate school or work or meaningful relationships, which is what we all want at the end of the day, kind of to have a sense of purpose in our work, and a sense of love and care for others. Um, but more concretely, I think one of the ways in my story where things could have been handled better, certainly at one of my undergraduate institutions, they handled my mental health challenges like many schools often want to do, which is kind of swipe it under the rug and 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 uh, and fortunately, I'm very grateful they facilitated an opportunity for me to complete my undergraduate studies and earn my degree, but I missed out on kind of the opportunity to walk with my colleagues during graduation and missed on kind of some of that pomp and circumstance and that ritual, that rite of passage, if you will, which there's meaning in that. And certainly after 4 years of work, you look forward to those type of things. But, I think in retrospect, schools could do a better job of trying to support the students so that they can stay in their academic community, because that's a big source of identity. It's a big source of support. There might be times where people need to go and go back to their family community, which can provide more support. But but uh, uh, but that's one way, and I felt that you know uh, schools could do a better job with dealing with the stigma surrounding mental health and the decisions they make towards students that are on their campuses, for example.
Definitely. Do you have ideas of how that stigma can be reduced in university setting?
Sure, I think one, to me, seemingly reasonable intervention is it's twofold. One, I've been to several universities, and you know ubiquitously there's always a mandatory training session on sexual assault on campus or on alcohol abuse or things of that sort. I don't see why we can't have an equivalent third one on mental health, first aid, or mental health awareness. Kind of here's a 1 hour, 2 hour module that you can complete on your own time on the warning signs of mental health and the resources on campus and what you want to do to de-escalate situation. So I think a little kind of like a universal education geared at freshman students may be a helpful intervention. And the other, I think, would be training a cohort, if you will, of RAs, of resident assistants, is it resident assistants, I guess,
Yeah.
or teaching assistants, TAs, to again have the skill sets to identify early warning signs of mental health, or work as a peer to provide some kind of peer support, either through role modeling their own, through sharing their own experience, or serving as a role model for other students, or through helping them access the community, the collegiate resources. So I think those are two interventions that could make the experience of students for future generations different than mine was, for example. Yeah.
Yeah, those are wonderful ideas. I really hope that universities move in that direction, and take that into consideration. From a personal standpoint, do you have any words of wisdom for college students who are going through a mental health scenario, and how they can take a step forward in approaching the journey?
Sure. Well, the first thing I would say right off the bat is to let them know that they're not alone, that this is, struggling with one's mental health during college is quite common. And there's a lot of other people who are unfortunately quietly struggling and not sharing their experiences, or seeking the peer community support that can facilitate their healing. Other than that, it's, I would try to normalize it, to understand that this is sort of par for the course of becoming an adult, that this is still a period of brain vulnerability in terms of development, in addition to the transition to a different environment, to college, and the stressors associated with that, and the stressors associated with that, with fully forming, kind of psychologically speaking, one's identity. Mental health challenges, and including even, down the road, mental health disorders of a more clinical type are, again, quite common. And I think, in addition to reassuring people they're not alone, we have to normalize the conversation in terms of how we talk about it. And lastly, I would tell them to not suffer in silence, to seek help, to talk to particularly peers. I think other people relatively close in age, who have walk the journey before them can serve as a particular valuable resource. And that gets back to my kind of intervention of training RAs. Many times we know with crisis hotlines that just talking to a peer
Mhm.
is sufficient to address the vast majority of the concerns of the person in needing help. And it's only a small subset of times that people need kind of more formal escalated services like uh, seeing a clinician for an assessment or um, going to a community center or something of that sort. So
Mhm.
seek help, from other people like yourself, and and again, remember, you're not alone.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. Such powerful messages. As a mental health physician, do you find ways to reduce stigma in that field? Is it along the similar lines, or are there any additional things that you do as a healthcare worker?
Sure. We'll have to clarify. I'm a mental health clinician, but I've been trained in the nursing model, so I'm an advanced practice nurse practitioner, APRN, and but at the end of the day, much of the work remains the same. um,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, um, I would say there's definitely some unique challenges in the field in of itself. I was talking to a friend the other day who is in medical school and is concerned with his recent diagnosis and the need to take off time from his rotations and how that's going to affect him when he applies for licensure in
Mhm.
his career down the road. So I think there are some kind of unique challenges like that for the professions within the mental health field. And But I think at the end of the day, the antidote remains very much the same. It remains, you know, um, fighting discrimination and stigma by storytelling, by raising awareness regarding uh, lived experiences of people living well with mental health conditions, including in professional paths like law, medicine, or so forth. And yeah, I think that's.
Mhm.
I think the antidote remains largely the same. I think in my role as a clinician, I try to uh, bridge those worlds in some way, the world from the biomedical paradigm
Mhm.
and the peer model of psychosocial recovery. And, and sometimes I level with my patients and it might be something as simple as, oh, yes, I take this medication also helps me sleep great, to
Mhm.
something more personal, if you will, and share, I had the same struggles in college with psychosis or so forth. And I think if you take your medications and you protect your sleep and you stay away from other substances, like you will largely be able to resume living the life you want to live and get back on track. And that's certainly true for most people. So I think that again that speaks towards the antidote of storytelling and relating to people as peers as well as professionals.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm going to take those tidbits of insight into my own practice one day, hopefully. Um, can you share, if you have any ideas, what all of us can do on an everyday basis to reduce that stigma? And I know you kind of mentioned the sharing your stories, talking, and having that sense of community and being part of that community. Do you have
Mm.
any other ideas how we can all contribute on an everyday basis?
Well, I think anyone listening to this podcast or watching this video is taking the right step. Is certainly challenging the stereotype and the preconception of what it is to live with schizophrenia by listening to people who are living well with it.
Mhm.
Um, of course, not to harp on the anecdotes of storytelling and community, but I think another important intervention is education. I think stigma is largely a product of our ignorance, and we are still only at the tip of the iceberg with our understanding of of the brain and the mind and our existence as humans, and when it goes awry in terms of um, pathology, clinical pathology. So so educating ourselves in recognizing that these conditions are, on the one hand, yes, they are mediated by biological mechanisms in the brain and then so forth. And on the other hand, there's still a huge psychosocial component because there's environmental factors, such as trauma or so forth, that could exacerbate or cause these mental health issues. And and I think understanding these illnesses from that paradigm is hopefully um, enlightening and allows people to face the stigma in an educated way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree. Do you have anything else to add today that we missed that you want to share with everyone?
Well, I think I'll do a plug. If anyone would like to follow me, they can visit my website, carloslarrauri.com. I'm also on Twitter, and I do have a musical group that when I find time, to do be creative, which is a whole other discussion, the role of arts and creativity in mental health. Um, I do write some songs about my experience, which I think empowers me and find my own narrative and voice in the journey. And our website is fogdog.net, fogdog.net. So there's a variety of channels by which people can stay connected to me and my work if they're interested. But most importantly, I just want to thank you and all the listeners. You've been a very thoughtful and attentive interviewer, and all the listeners. I think thank you for doing the work of helping to change people's hearts and minds to combat stigma by listening to my story. And I encourage you to share yours.
Thank you so much, Carlos.
Thank you all so much for joining in and listening with our interview with Carlos. I hope you all are as inspired by his voice and his story and words of wisdom as I am. I couldn't help but take a look at his music after we hung up our call and play it in the background as I'm speaking now, because it truly is amazing. And the message that they emanate with this music is that every person matters and that each individual possesses an irreplaceable calling that can inspire others to grow and heal. And so their music really is medicine for the soul, and I wanted to share that with everyone here. And I encourage you all to take a listen as well. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you on our next episode of Break the Stigma.
So baby, please remember.